Lance Stroll and Aston Martin have a very important period ahead of them as the future of the Canadian driver has been brought into question yet again. This time, the change of scenery in the Silverstone-based squad is making the scenario of seeing Lance compete in another championship very realistic. And with some of the stuff he's made and the body language he's shown, there is quite a lot to talk about whether or not he's happy in an F1 seat. With this in mind, can the nepotistic scenario of Aston Martin finally go to Vane? And if so, who would be the successor of Lance? It goes without saying that Lance Stroll has been a very controversial figure in the sport, but for all the wrong reasons. The Canadian driver has been outscored massively by Alonso last year, 70 to 24 points, and it's not like Lance has been competitive at any stage throughout his stint with Aston Martin. When the team was fighting for podiums in the first half of 2023, Lance was nowhere to be found compared to Alonso, who scored 6 podiums in the first 8 races in that season. But that is just an indicator as to how a driver who understands that his future might be in danger performs, compared to one who knows that as long as his father is owning the team, he'll have a safe seat. But truth be told, there is more behind this story, and at this time it might not even be up to Lawrence to decide whether or not Lance will remain in the team. Throughout last year as well as 2023, we've seen that Lance has expressed wishes for competing in other categories, and there were talks from his mother that he's not really that happy in Formula 1. Reports and rumours have gone on to the extent that Lance's only reason for being in F1 is to make his father happy, which is so far proving true because no other driver would get to keep his seat if he performed the way Lance does right now. I'm not saying that he doesn't have any talent. We've seen that he was very competitive in Williams and the crazy season in 2020 with Racing Point, where he won a pole position as well. But those times are long forgotten and the scenery is brand new right now. Lance has managed to outqualify Alonso only 6 times in 2024, which is devastating considering the fact that both of them had to drive a very problematic car that didn't respond to upgrades. Add salt to the wound and it doesn't look like Lance wants to be in the sport anyway, at least if we're to judge by his body language and the emotions he expresses during the press conference and when talking to his race engineer. The former team principal of Haas, Günther Steiner, who is now working as a professional analyst in the sport, believes that Lance doesn't want to be an F1 driver, and that might be a bitter pill to swallow for his father. When talking about this to a greater extent, Günther said, "He never looks happy. He never seems to be happy whatever happens. Would he be a world champion if he was happy? I don't know about that one. Some people can be good even when they are unhappy. However, that might just be his expression. A lot of people critique him that he is such a bad driver. He is just there because daddy has the team. But put it this way, if daddy didn't have the team, I don't think Lance would be a Formula 1 driver because he doesn't want to be one." Mike Crack, the former team principal of Aston Martin, has defended Stroll regarding the comments made from Steiner, as he went on to say, "When we had the 3-week break recently, I had Lance on the phone asking if we could organise some driving somehow in an old car because he wants to drive. So that is the difference. It's a sport with no testing and we have someone who loves driving. It's very unfair when you read some of the comments and they are often written without much research because it suits the public opinion. Let's write that and we can fill some lines." There have been interesting events happening in the past couple of weeks where Lance Stroll has tried out in another racing category such as rallying, and to be fair, the inserts have shown a pretty decent craft that maybe Lance has in him, but wasn't too keen on pushing in that area because of his father's ambitions. Yes, Lance is the primary reason why Aston Martin entered into the sport, thanks to Lawrence's money, and now that they are one of the greatest threats regarding 2026, the Canadian driver is the one that we should paradoxically thank because of everything that's happened to this point. But certain situations can be altered and affected by other significant parties from the world of Formula 1. In this scenario, Aston Martin needs to understand that if they want to compete for the championship, they will need 2 high point scoring drivers, and with Alonso retiring at the end of 2026, at least according to his own words, Lance might not be the best choice for one of those seats. And here is the part where the other parties that Aston Martin signed in order to guarantee the success of their own team would have a greater say than usual, starting with Adrian Newey. The Brit has reportedly had talks with Lawrence Stroll behind closed doors, where he expressed his dissatisfaction with Lance Stroll and said that he would want to have him replaced. As hard as that sounds, we must remember that Newey is a technical partner of Aston Martin, and although we don't know how far his words can go and what his inferences are regarding the team's lineup, it's something that has been backed up by Honda as well in an unrelated manner to the Newey-Lawrence talk. The Japanese manufacturer has been known as a team team to take care of their drivers very well, and with the current situation between Tsunoda and Aston Martin, there is no doubt that an opening is being created for a sensational move for Yuki. Of course, Horner's statements that Tsunoda cannot always be the bridesmaid and the team would be open to giving him away after 5 years of not promoting him to the senior team are also going in favour of this scenario happening in reality. But what we must not forget is that Aston Martin is aimed for the ultimate prize, signing Verstappen once Alonso decides that enough is enough, which should be from 2027 onwards. If we add the dissatisfaction of Lance with the sport and his latest rallying outing, it could create a reality in which we're going to see Max and Yuki being teammates, just not in Red Bull. They would be reunited with Honda and Newey, and more importantly, they wouldn't have any preferential treatment at all, despite Max most likely not needing one compared to Yuki. But let's see what would happen if the only replacement came at the place of Alonso and not Stroll, and why it would be bad for Aston to aim towards this scenario. It would be easy to assume that the driver who would replace Alonso will immediately be better than Stroll, especially if it's the most wanted asset on the grid, Verstappen. Therefore, the question arises, do you really want to be in this sport just because you have a safe job and just because you know that you have protection from the top man himself? Maybe Lance has talents that he's yet to develop, because we're not talking about a veteran here, we're talking about a man who's not even in his 30s, so racing in other championships doesn't seem too distant of a goal either. Aston Martin themselves have branches in the World Endurance Championship as one of the categories that might satisfy Lance's ambitions, and even if it's not related to their own team, just because he performs badly in F1 doesn't mean his future in all of the other racing categories is doomed. F1 is a sport that requires a lot of talent, dedication and hard work, and while Lance might have the talent, the lack of the other two is making him a bit of a liability on the grid. Now, with Newey and Honda entering the team, and with high-profile engineers like Enrico Cardiel and Andy Cowell, Aston Martin would be very optimistic to aim for nothing less than a double championship from 2026 onwards. And despite Honda's negative comments regarding the first season of the new regulations, the knowledge of these engineers is going to narrate whether or not the duo in Aston Martin in 2026 will have a realistic chance of fighting at the front. Here is another bummer for Lance. Even if he is given the car, does he have what it takes to win the championship? For example, the 2026 season is expected to be an engine-dominated one, according to Newey, as he pointed out that we might see something similar to what we saw back in 2014 and Mercedes. So if Honda really is that engine manufacturer, which would be hard to achieve now that we have Mercedes and Ferrari as the favourites too, is Lance the driver to bank on in these results? We are not talking about Verstappen, who won a championship with the third fastest car here. We're talking about a driver who would have to have an extraordinarily good car and immensely bad competition in order to win a championship in his career, which is ultimately the goal of Lawrence. With all this in mind, do you think that Lance Stroll is not good enough to be part of Aston Martin? And more importantly, do you think that a replacement will be well on its way sooner rather than later? Let us know in the comments below, and if you want to find out more about Vettel's grandiose comeback in the sport from 2026 onwards, make sure to check out the video that's appearing on your screen right now.